As we go through the Beatitudes found in Matthew chapter 5, you can open your Bibles there. Last week we looked at the poor in spirit and those who mourn. This morning we focus on blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Verse 5 and verse 6, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Last week when I introduced the message, I read all the way through the 12 verses of the Beatitudes, and I challenged you as a church, as I'm also challenging myself, to memorize the first 12 verses of chapter 5. So I hope that you're doing that. I hope you'll find it a benefit to your walk with Christ. But we talked about what a strange economy it is that God has, that here the Messiah is on the scene. He preaches this early recorded message to his followers. There's obviously a multitude nearby. And what he tells them is that in God's economy, his description of who is blessed or makarios, who is happy, are not the people that we would typically think of. And if ever we needed any more introduction, it would be that very first verse in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, those who have realized their poverty in all things as it relates to spirituality. Blessed are those who mourn. We wouldn't normally think of a mourning person, someone who is sorrowful, as being happy. But what Jesus is telling us is in God's kingdom, in God's economy, this is the case. Remember, he's teaching us something because we didn't already know it. And this morning he says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. I want to take really the same outline that I used last week, but rather than poor in spirit and mourning, I want to plug these two in. So if you were here last week, this is really going to be the same outline that we followed last week. So we ask ourselves this question: what is meekness? And that's really the important thing for us to be able to nail down. What does it mean to be meek? And if you think about it, this world and how different Jesus' teaching is compared to the world structure that we're familiar with, is that in our current world structure, we look to the strong. We look to those who are sometimes headstrong. We look to the ones who are great accomplishers and great doers. This world literally is led, by and large, by those who have force and have a magnitude about their personality. They are big personalities. They do big things. And what Jesus says is that the kingdom doesn't run off of that type of style. He's saying the blessed ones are not the ones that are we would normally think of as powerful or strong or assertive, the ones that take it by force. No, what Jesus says, again, is flipping this on its head. He says, blessed are the meek. Meekness, oftentimes in our culture, is translated to weakness. We see somebody that is meek, and we think of that as a deficiency on their part. We want them to strengthen up. We want them to, to really own the position. And really, we need to understand what it means to truly be meek. And in order to understand what it truly means to be meek, let's go back to what Jesus said and understand the reference that he's tying this into. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Jesus is speaking to them in an Old Testament language to communicate a new covenant truth. So as he's speaking to these disciples who are very well versed in the Old Testament, as he is speaking to religious leaders and the multitudes who would have had a very good grasp of the Old Testament, Jesus is using a verse out of Psalm 37, and I'm going to show it to you up on the board. I want you to see the context of this psalm as Jesus is borrowing from it and quoting it to use this Old Testament language to communicate this new covenant truth. This is what Psalm 37, verse 7 through 11 says. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourselves over the one who prospers in his way, over the man who carries out evil devices. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself, it tends only to evil. For the evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land. In just a little while, the wicked will be no more. Though you look carefully at his place, he will not be there. But the meek shall inherit the earth and delight themselves in abundant peace. Jesus was drawing this stark contrast. The psalmist, Jesus borrowed this stark contrast written by the psalmist to say, don't be like the wicked. Don't be like the one who devises evil. Don't be like the one who is proud. So don't be like the one who is angry, is what he is saying. So what we understand about meekness in the original term, in that original language that Jesus was borrowing, we know that a meek person is not by any stretch of the imagination weak. They literally are controlled. They found themselves submitted under the lordship of God. They are patient. They are kind. They literally are the beneficiaries of the fruit of the Spirit in their life. These people are ones who are teachable and yielded. They are moldable. So what Jesus is saying, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the land. When you go back and plug that into the minds of the people who were listening to that, no doubt they're thinking of Canaan. No doubt when the psalmist was writing that, what he was saying is it's going to be the meek that are going to be able to walk in to all of God's property that he has provided in that covenant. And if you think about it in our context, though we don't have necessarily a border or a boundary, religiously speaking, that is made up or pointed to on a map, we can look and say that when I am yielded to God, when I have a life that is teachable and moldable and bendable, when I have strength under discipline and I am yielded to God, I have at my disposal all of the spiritual property that God has for me. That all of the promises, all of the blessings, all of this spiritual topography out in front of me is mine. Literally, I have when I am teachable, when I am moldable. One of the great needs in our Christian culture today is a need of teachable attitudes, teachable spirits. Not people coming to the table as though we know everything, but to be even mature in our faith, to be teachable. I want to learn something of God. I want to be molded to God. There's a great need in our Christian culture today of us to be yielded to God, to literally come to God's word, to read it, to understand what it says, and to say, God, I want to do that. I am moldable. If you think about the idea of meekness equaling weakness as we perceive it, I want you to think of what happened in Acts chapter 16. You don't have to turn there, but I'll tell you that Paul and the apostles were imprisoned and they were beaten severely for nothing they did wrong. And when it came time for them to be released in Acts chapter 16, the leaders came and tried to dismiss them quietly. Paul turned to them and he said, if the leaders are going to release us, you let them come and get us out of here. They were the ones that threw us in here. They were the ones that ordered the beatings on us. If they're going to release us, if you're going to release us, you go get your magistrates and bring them back here. That doesn't seem meek at all, does it? Let me give you another example of meekness. In John chapter 18, in fact, I want to read these words to you. In John chapter 18, verse 22 and 23, Jesus is now on trial. Jesus, who is the perfect embodiment of meekness. Okay? Jesus, who is our example of what it is to be meek. Standing on trial. The Bible tells us in John 18 that the high priest was asking questions of his teachings and the disciples' teachings. Jesus said, why don't you ask the disciples? Why don't you ask the people who heard me? And it says in verse 22, when he had said these things, one of the officers standing by struck Jesus with his hand, saying, is that how you answer the high priest? Jesus answered him, if what I said is wrong, bear witness about the wrong. But if what I said is right, why do you strike me? Jesus, who is the embodiment of perfect meekness, was beaten for no cause. And what did he say? What did he turn around? He turned around and in a strong statement, after being hit, if what I said is wrong, then do your thing. But if what I said was right, why are you hitting me? Godly meekness always stands up for its God-given rights. It may be meek as far as the world is concerned, but what that meek person knows about what they have in God and the promises, they are not meek in those. They claim those promises. They hold to those promises. They support those promises. Better yet, those promises support them. Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the teachable ones. Blessed are the yielded ones, the moldable ones." Isaiah 61:1, "The Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings unto the meek." Psalm 149, verse 4, "The Lord takes pleasure in His people. He will beautify the meek with salvation." Go back with me to verse 3 for a moment. I told you that I believe these Beatitudes are all linked together. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Person has no claim to any spiritual wealth of their own nature. They're poor, they're bankrupt, they're without. Blessed are those who mourn. Why are they mourning? They're mourning over their spiritual deficiencies. They're mourning over sin. They're sorry. They're grieving over their sin, their inadequacies, their deficiencies, and the deficiencies, sins, and inadequacies of the world around them. Someone has emptied themselves. Someone is mourning over what they don't have. But then they are meek. God, I don't have it. God, I'm sorry I don't have it. But God, I'm ready right now to learn what I need to learn. I'm coming from a place of spiritual brokenness. I'm coming from a place where I have been reading the clippings about myself and they're not true. I've come to the place to realize I don't have anything to offer you of myself. And I'm sorry about that, God. And now, that sense of meekness says, God, the only way I can get it is from you. I am ready to be taught. I am yielding under your lordship, under your authority. These are not just characteristics that he pulled and just thought he'd slap them all together. The Beatitudes are an amazing progression of the life of a believer, literally taking them from the dust before God and watching that person rise with Christ, poor in spirit, mourning. I'm meek. I'm ready to be taught. The person who is meek in Christ realizes they don't have the answers. Why are they blessed? Well, according to Jesus, there are two blessings. One is Makarios. They will be happy. Happy are you when you are meek. Happy are you when you are teachable. Happy are you, Jesus said, when you are yielded to Him and to His Spirit. But there's something else. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the land. They shall inherit the earth. That means because of my parentage in God, mixed with my yieldedness of spirit towards Him and His will, I then will inherit all things. Now, don't get me wrong. We know that we are heirs with Christ. We're joint heirs with Christ. We know that we have a tremendous spiritual inheritance that is coming our way and will be fulfilled perfectly and completely when we stand before God someday. We know that. But I believe that that instance that he's speaking of in inheriting the earth is not just something that we're going to have in a new heaven and a new earth. It's not just something we're going to have in the heavenlies. We're going to inherit particular blessings in our life over this yieldedness. You speak to anybody. You talk to anybody that has a teachable, yielded, submissive spirit to the will of God, and they will tell you that they have inherited tremendous blessings from God. And friends, I'm not talking about money, so if you're thinking about money, just forget about it. It could be, I have no idea. But what they have received in God's economy from being yielded, from being submissive, from being willing to go when he says to go, those people will tell you with their own mouths that they are among the most blessed people in the world. I cannot believe I get to do what I get to do. We talk all the time in staff meeting. Can you believe people pay us to do this? I mean, we have the greatest calling and job, occupation, whatever you call it, in the world. And I have to be able to go back to that moment when I was 18 and I realized my life was not on track with God. I was a believer, but my life was out of line with God. And I remember the moment that I fell down on my floor of my bedroom and I said, God, I want my life to be your life. Wherever you want me to go, I'll go. Whatever you tell me to say, I'll say. Have I kept that promise? Mostly. But from that attitude that I try to keep in the forefront, there have been amazing spiritual blessings laid on my life. Talk to Mr. Tim someday about the blessings that has come in his life in yieldedness. Talk to Jason about the blessings that God has brought, the inheritance that God has given him beforehand on his life. Talk to anybody that strives to be yielded. You know somebody, talk to your Sunday school teacher about yieldedness, and they'll share with you the blessings that have come in their life. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. What does it mean? That's pretty easy, right? We know what it means to hunger after food, don't we? Right? Same thing. Jesus is using a physical style of hunger and thirst, a physical need, to describe a spiritual relationship. There's a longing for righteousness on behalf of this person. Plug that back in. Plug it back into our progression. They know they don't have it. They grieve over it. They're to the place where they're teachable, and now they hunger for it. God, I am actively seeking to do what is right. God, I know if I am hungry, it means I don't have food, right? If I'm thirsty, it means I don't have water. Because if I had water, I would drink it and I wouldn't be thirsty. If I had food, I would eat it and I wouldn't be hungry. This person who is spiritually hungry and thirsty for righteousness has still held on to the fact that they don't have what they need. And they realize that the answer comes from God. So they're saying, God, I know I don't have it. God, I'm sorry that I don't have it. God, I am mourning and weeping over the fact that I don't have it. God, I am meek and teachable, and now I have an appetite for it. This is the moment in that believer's life where all of the three are lining up to this one. All of the previous three are to bring them to that place where they say, God, I know what it is and I want it. If I'm hungry, I'm going to actively seek food. If I'm thirsty, I'm going to actively seek to get something to drink. That's the way it is with this. God, I know where to find it. It's in your word. God, I know my example, it's Jesus. And that's what I want. As much as I hunger for food, I spiritually hunger to do what is right, to walk and to talk and to look like Jesus as much as I possibly can. How do we know? This is an important part. How do we know what we're hungering and thirsting after? How do you and I know what our pursuit of life is? What are we questing for? Jesus said, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be what? Filled, satisfied, some translations. The truth is, if I want to know what I am hungry and thirsty after in my life, all I need to do is ask God, what am I filled with? What's in here? God, is it pride? Is it the advancement of me? God, is it my way? God, is it lust? Is it greed? Is it envy? Is it bitterness? Is it hatred? What lies in this cage of my heart? What am I filled with? Because when you and I are able to identify what our life is filled with, we're going to be able to say, you're right, that's exactly what I've been pursuing. That's what I've been pursuing on the internet. That's what I've been pursuing in relationships. That's what I've been pursuing in my quiet time. That's what I've been having in my thoughts. That's what all of this is all about. We try to say, yes, God, I'm hungry and thirsty after you. We try to look at our pursuit and say, is that what my pursuit really is? That's the wrong way to do it. Go to point B to find out what point A is. Go to the destination. Look at your heart. Have an honest conversation with God about what is filling your life. And then reverse engineer that and say, if I'm full in here, I realize that all of these other reservoirs are pouring in here. And then ask yourself the follow-up question, God, is it righteousness? God, am I following after you? God, do I pursue you? Do I run after you? Am I like the deer panting for the water's brook in an area where there is no water? As a deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you. Oh God, my soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? Psalm 42. God, I gotta have it. I've gotta have you. How are they blessed? That's our question. How are they blessed? They shall be satisfied. They shall be filled. You know, every time that Greek word is used in our English for filled, it's always used to describe full bellies. Always. It's found in James. Be you warmed and filled. The word filled is the same word used here. It's the same in Revelation chapter 20, speaking about the birds of the air that are going to devour the flesh, that the birds of the air will be filled with flesh. What he's saying is that when we desire it, we'll be filled with it. Is that not true in God's spiritual economy with anything? If I am desiring lust, am I not going to work my tail off to fulfill that desire? Yes, I'm going to fill myself with that. Whatever I sow, I'm also going to reap. I mean, that's a spiritual principle. So Jesus is not just saying that you're going to be filled with it. That's true on anything. Am I filled? Am I requesting? Am I coming to God? Saying, God, I want to be more like you. All of these. All of these. The enemy knows these. Truth be told, the enemy knows the Bible better than we do, probably. He's aware of this spiritual progression. He understands these beatitudes of the blessings of God on this life, and he doesn't want us to have those blessings. And I believe oftentimes he's going to come in for the purpose of getting us to misalign those blessings. That we would be willing to dilute the beauty of what Makarios means. A fullness, a happiness, a satisfaction. That I would be willing to say, God, I want to run after things that are never going to satisfy, never going to meet my needs. And I'm going to forfeit the Makarios. I'm going to forfeit the blessing to run after things that are only going to pass away. I would forfeit meekness over stubbornness and non-yieldedness. I'm going to keep my own way, do everything the way I want to do it. But God, when I do that, I'm forfeiting your happiness. I'm forfeiting this blessing that you have for me in my life. Isn't it remarkable that the enemy only wants us to focus on what we get, not on what we're letting go of in sin? He did that with Adam and Eve, didn't he? When she saw that the tree was beautiful and good for knowledge, that it was good to make one wise, she partook and gave to her husband. The enemy made that fruit look so good that she was willing to let go of the promises of God. She was willing to forfeit that close, intimate, personal relationship with God, walking in the garden in the cool of the day for that piece of fruit. that brought sin on her life. You and I are going to be tempted to forfeit these blessings. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. And blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. Is that your quest? Thanks for taking the time to listen to the podcast. I hope this message has helped you. If you made a decision for Christ or would like to speak with a staff member, call 417-624-4585 or email Carrie@FirstJoplin. Please subscribe and rate our podcast. Feel free to share it with your social media circle. We're glad you plugged into the teaching ministry of First Joplin, but would love to meet you in person if possible. Visit firstjoplin.org for information on plans.